What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 30 Minutes of Hell podcast. I am your host, Brandon Baker, joined as always by Joey Jackson and Matt Jackson. Reminder that we are brought to you by the Field of 68 Podcast Network. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your stuff under the Field of 68 Podcast Network. It's been a little while since we've talked. There has not been a lot of roster movement. Cal has been working in silence a lot, but we did just get our ninth commit of next year's roster and the first returning player. Trevon Brazil has announced that he is returning to Arkansas.
And what a surprise it is.
I was certainly shocked when it popped up, but we'll get into our reactions and thoughts to that. We're going to talk a little bit about just kind of the roster overall as it stands. We're probably approaching the end of Cal's heavy recruiting period in terms of some of the bigger names available. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what that might look like, how he might close out his roster, if he's going to look at maybe some more guys, or how he fills those final four spots that are still open, if he fills the final four spots. But let's get into the headline news. Trevon Brazil is back. Give me your reactions to that when you heard that today.
I was shocked. I mean, we've talked about it just between us, but we didn't expect him to come back to Arkansas after, his showing last season. I think my first reaction was just utter surprise. I'm excited. I think that he has the potential to have a great season in the right the right role, the right capacity. I'm I look forward to how he takes this new opportunity and runs with it.
Yeah, I think you said it right there. It has the potential to have a good season. Is just raw potential at this point. We don't know. Well, we kind of had glimpses of what we could see from him. But I'm still hyped. I'm excited that he's coming back. I like having that explosive guy, and I feel like we were kind of lacking that in this roster right now, as far as his position specifically. But honestly, I was shocked that he withdrew from the draft. I felt like this was one of his better chances of getting drafted, especially if he has a down year next year. Hopefully he doesn't, but if he does, I mean, man, you missed out on a pretty good opportunity to go to the draft. So that was shocking uh, to me in terms of him pulling back.
Yeah, and to touch on that a little bit, I don't know exactly what feedback he got, but if he's grading out kind of where he was projected in a lot of places, which is second round, 50s, those kind of places, you're not guaranteed money at that point anyways. A lot of
True.
those guys are signing two-way deals, things like that. So I understand a little bit the decision. You're almost making as much money in college these days as you are on a two-way deal for a season in the NBA. So
True.
if he can come back, make some money in college, compete on a fun roster, something he's familiar with, and then try again and still get the same two-way offer next year, I get that, depending on what feedback he got, but let me tell you a little bit why I'm optimistic that I think Brazil is a really good addition to this current roster that we're seeing. All right. I think a lot of people probably have a sour taste in their mouth from last year's team as a whole. And Brazil was part of that problem. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think that we came into the season expecting him to be a leader, expecting him to be one of the primary options on offense, both as an off ball guy, but also as kind of someone that maybe can take a step forward as a creator for himself. And we saw glimpses occasionally of a pull-up jump shot here and there, but we never saw him grow into the kind of person, the kind of leader that we needed on last year's team. And that was one of the biggest issues among a bevy of issues that last year's team had. But if you go back 2 years ago and Brazil did not have those kind of expectations, we thought that he was just a bouncy forward that was going to play a role on that roster with Anthony Black, with Nick Smith Jr., with those guys. He looked fantastic, right? He was not the focal point of the offense per se, but more importantly, you had guys that could create and opportunities for themselves and for others, specifically Anthony Black. Trevon Brazil looks so good next to him because he's a really good passer. And I know that we don't have an Anthony Black on this current team, but the guards that Cal has brought in already are much closer to that type of player that is more of a facilitator and a creator and can get an offense rolling, can like Brazil. I think the guys that he's brought in are better at that than some of the guys we saw in last year's roster, if that makes sense. So guys like L. Ellis he just didn't pan out like we wanted him to. Keon Minifield, we saw some good lobs from him to Brazil. Still a score first guy. Tremont Mark was an ISO scorer. Caleb Battle was an ISO scorer. All these guys were good at certain things, but none of them were the facilitator that we needed to set up guys like Brazil. So that alone is why I'm very optimistic as to what he could be on this coming roster. I think when he slots in as someone that you're not depending heavily on to just give the ball to and let him go to work, but rather let him spot up and shoot threes, let him operate out of the pick and roll as, a lob threat, let him crash the offensive glass, things that he's comfortable doing. I think he could be a fantastic addition to the team without having to be the guy that we thought he might be last year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we talked about this earlier on in the season, saying how when we started seeing Brazil thrive was when he was becoming more of the third or even fourth behind some of the guys that were stepping up later in the season. And I think you hit it right there, just saying, hey, he's not going to be the focal point of the offense, but when you're not paying attention to him, he'll dunk on your head. So I'm excited to see what he looks like, and playing alongside some of those bigs that we have, kind of being able to hide his defensive ability a little bit, because we have a few better defenders this year on this roster, and let him be more of just a help side shot blocker. I think that's going to help us a ton, and I think we're going to see him thrive in that role.
I think y'all hit on Brazil a lot as a player. I agree with both of y'all's points. I think the reason that Brazil is such a question mark is because of his mentality. Some days he comes in and he plays like he's a lottery pick. We saw him last year, like Brandon mentioned, show sparks of greatness where, he would have 3-4 blocks a game. He'd pair that with 7-8 rebounds a game. And then he would, put up 12 to 15 points. And that's the Brazil that we expected to see the full year. But then other games he would come in and he would play like a walk-on to a YMCA game. Brandon, you already said that he was great in the second half of the season once he kind of started understanding his role. But I think a lot of it came down to pressure. He was coming off of a year where he was injured. He didn't get to play, and he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was coming in projected to be a top 10 player in college basketball, and he was given this random assortment of guys and expected to carry this Razorback team to, gold. And I think that he put a lot of pressure on himself. I think once he kind of took those, was it 10 games off with his injury last season and then came back in February, I think he was able to release that pressure, because at that point when he was coming back, the season was, for lack of a better word, done. I think that he let that pressure go, and it's interesting because this season the pressure is still there, but it's such a different kind of pressure. It's more of like a chip on your shoulder to prove that you are that guy, that you can come back and have a great season, and basically prove the people who are doubting you wrong. And I think that's super interesting. I really just want him to come in and, like we all talked about all of last season, just let the game come to him. If he can just sit back and be the system player that comes in, gets a few rebounds, gets a few blocks, puts up 8 to 10 a game, I think everyone's happy with that. I think if he can come in with consistency and just let that pressure go, I think he's a first round draft pick. I mean, obviously we saw the potential of him being a lottery pick. I think that it can be great for him and the Razorbacks. Will it? It's hard to say just yet with what we saw from him last year, but I think the potential is 100% there.
Yeah, and one point I want to make on his mentality, I feel like that's going to have to get in check, and I feel like he knows it, because you're playing on a team that is incredibly talented. Like, you want playing time, which, I mean, with the amount of players we got on our roster, you're probably going to get some. But if you want solid minutes to prove yourself as a player to NBA scouts and everything, you got to come in ready to play. You got to come in ready to practice and then ready to play. And so I think he's going to get that mentality in check for sure.
especially for Calipari.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So let me jump in right there for a second, because one thing that I've been told today, since right before recording, um, go ahead and talk about it now. Coleman Hawkins was a transfer from Illinois that we thought we were very in on. It seemed like he was plan A, and for a while it kind of seemed like Brazil might be one of the plan Bs. And then today it was kind of, hinted at, mentioned that when Cal and his staff met with Coleman Hawkins, that they weren't impressed with his mentality and with his maturity and with his approach. And the reason they opted to go with Brazil was because of those things, because Brazil is now getting fully healthy, because he's got the NBA feedback, because he's bought in, he's ready to go. And so, case, I mean, if Cal is choosing Brazil over Hawkins because of mentality, we know the skill is there. You're absolutely right. It's just about his buy-in level, his ability to not let his injury consistently, weigh on his mind. Those kind of things are the only thing holding him back from being the elite college player, the elite pro prospect that we thought that he could be. And also kind of touching on a point that Joey mentioned too, at the end of the year when he came back from injury, he played like 4 minutes in his first game back. But then if you look at the next 6 games to end his season, he averaged almost 10 points a game, 5 rebounds, 1.5 blocks a game, and shot 38% from three, 56% from the field over his final 6 games of the season. And that's kind of when he started settling in and not almost, I think you put it very well, Joe. He didn't put pressure on himself to be the guy. He wasn't trying to create things for himself. He was looking for opportunities to score and to contribute without the ball in his hands. He was spotting up better. He was crashing the glass better. He was blocking shots, doing little things that we thought that he was going to do the whole time. So if that's the role that he plays and we get a consistent 9.5 points, 5 rebounds, 1.3 blocks on 37% shooting, that's a fantastic starter. We
Oh
don't need
yeah.
him to be our best player. That is a fantastic starter. So that's why I'm excited about him coming back. Um,
Yep.
but let's get into a little bit more too of the how he kind of fits with this roster, because we're pretty much done, like I mentioned, more than likely done with the core guys, right? The rotation is pretty much there. We've got 9 guys. Probably going to add some depth as we go forward. I don't think all 4 of the roster spots will remain open. But let's talk a little bit about how this roster is shaping up, how it kind of fits together, and some of the things we like. Um, but first, we're going to take a quick break for some ads, and we will be right back.
The best month of the year is here, which is why you need to know that we are partnered with BetMGM. We'll be using BetMGM lines for making all of our picks and predictions, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your hard-earned money to get it. This is what you have to do to make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll get up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the rest of the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boost, and the thing that I love the most, a nice little parlay boost, as well as a ridiculous array of prop bets for anything that you could possibly imagine betting on. From odds on getting to the Final Four to national championship futures, I'm calling it right now. BetMGM is the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app. Use that code FIELD and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the pod in any podcast app. Like and share the YouTube videos that you enjoy. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show.
All right, let's get into it. So the roster, I think, is still coming together very nicely, and they've got 9 guys on the team so far. You've got several good ball handlers, I think, at the guard positions. You've got, DJ Wagner's coming in now as a good assist guy. John L. Davis is a really good scorer, very experienced guard. Boogie Flan coming in is one of those guys that can beat pretty much anybody off the dribble. It's just about consistency and shot selection, those type of things with Boogie. But I love the ball handlers, love the scoring options. Along with Davis and Flan, you've got Carter Knox that can score from anywhere, a couple of stretch big men, good size at the wing with Knox, with Edu Thero, Richmond even, and now Brazil at the 4 spot. and now 3 guys that can play at the center position. And not only can they soak up minutes at center, but they're versatile enough that they could probably play beside each other, right? You can see a lot of lineups with 2 of the 3 big men out there between Brazil, Big Z, and Jonas Adu. So that excites me, just that kind of versatility. What do you guys think about the roster right now? Is there, one spot that stands out as a strength or maybe a weakness that you might be worried about with the guys that we have right now?
I think this roster is so interesting because I truly don't know who we're going to come out with as our starting 5. We've got so much talent on this roster. I feel like it's very well rounded. I love our bigs. I've been very vocal about the acquisition of Big Z, Adu, and now that we're throwing TB in the mix, we're looking solid in the big man area. And Brandon, you mentioned running the 2 bigs. Really, Brazil's versatile enough to, if we want to go huge, we can run him at the 3 as well, and have a 3, 4, and 5 of 7-footers. But I really like how this team is shaping up. I don't, outside of maybe shooting, like 3-point shooting, we're still decent in shooting. We're not bad by any means, but that's definitely where our weak spot kind of lies. And I would love to, get someone else in there that can be just a spot up shooter. But from what you said, it doesn't sound like we're getting anything like that.
What's really funny about what you said is it's exactly what we said about last year's team. Who are we gonna start? There's so much talent. But I feel like the difference is the guy we got at the head bringing in this talent.
Well, we said that last year too, man.
Yeah, true.
We said no one can coach like Muss. No one can recruit like Muss.
Straight up. Oh, man, what a disappointment that was. But anyway, I don't know. Knowing that we have the recruiter, it makes this talent seem a little bit different, And I do agree. Like, who are we going to bring in? Who are going to have as their starting 5? Who's going to be our 6th man? And who's going to be the guy? And maybe that with the knockdown shooter player, maybe it's just a random guy he pulls for depth.
Joseph
Pinion like player, but who knows? Even better, because you never know if somebody gets hurt and that guy has to step up and play some minutes. There has been players like that in plenty of other teams that just pop up and play their heart out and are legendary college basketball players. And I mean, shoot, one of them, he wasn't off the bench, but he just came in, beat Calipari out of the tournament last year.
Yeah.
So
I do think what you just said, though, the injuries would be my number one concern right now over any sort of skill set on the court is just the number of quality guys that we can field at the moment.
Yeah, and it's just that looking at the roster, just at a glance, I feel like there's a few guys that have had injuries in their past. I think a few episodes ago, maybe even last episode, I mentioned that Fland had injury, I think like his junior season, maybe sophomore season. So he's not free of injuries. And then, of course, we all know what happened to Brazil. And did Big Z have an injury? Or no, he just came in late?
He came in
late due to eligibility, yeah.
Okay. And so that's why he wasn't getting much. So, and, we have 9 guys, but 1 goes down, 9 goes to 8. Another goes down, 8 goes to 7. Yeah. So, there's always that concern. Yes, I'm thinking of like a purely hypothetical, kind of like packing underwear type of deal, right? You sit there and you pack a bunch of underwear, think you're going to poop yourself the entire trip. But in reality, it may not happen.
Matt, this is a Razorback podcast. What are you going on about?
But listen,
this isn't your bachelor party.
That's what it's like.
That is an elite analogy for preparedness, Matt. Don't let him talk down to you.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it's good. So that's what I'm saying, though. You get what I'm saying, though. I think of the worst possible thing that can happen, and it will happen. All right. So Hopefully it doesn't. So maybe we'll be good with just 9.
Now,
But
correct me if y'all feel differently here, but we mentioned how we said the same thing about last year's team. This team just it feels a lot more cohesive than last team. Last year it seemed like it was a lot of going to, a a bad school and getting the best player and throwing them into the mix. We've expressed our frustrations with Musselman in the past about like seeing what we're lacking the year before and going and getting only what we were lacking. This feels so much different. We Big Z
Yeah,
is not. Go ahead, Brandon.
I was waiting on Matt to finish to jump in and say exactly that. It's about two things for me that make this feel different. And one is exactly what you're saying. It's the quality of guys that are brought in, not just from their stats, but from where they came from, right?
Yeah.
You've got a bunch of high major guys and a bunch of 5-star freshmen. That is different than guys that are coming from Louisville and
Louisville.
Temple.
Yep.
No offense
Right.
to those guys, but it's different. You've got guys coming from Tennessee and Kentucky and
Winning
5-star
programs.
freshmen to come with them. And the second thing for me is who is running the show. We thought, and that again, not a slight to anybody, but the point guards, the guards that run last year's roster did not run the show the way we thought that they were going to. They were not the facilitators that we needed all season. But I have a lot more faith that DJ Wagner can take a step up from what was a good freshman season. Remember that he was playing alongside Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepard, and he still averaged over 3 assists per game and was very good defensively as a true freshman. You've got John L. Davis with Final Four experience, not just Final Four experience, but being the dude on that team. You've got Boogie Flan coming in with an elite offensive skill set. I trust those guys to be facilitators and to run the show better than the guys that we had last year. So those two things make this feel a lot different for me. Go ahead, Joey. Sorry to cut you off in the middle there.
No, you completely covered where I was going. You look at guys like Big Z, who he wasn't the best player last year for his team, but he comes into Arkansas with we know what he's capable of. It's just different. It's not Cal going out and trying to get the best player from bad schools. It just feels more cohesive this year.
He recruited fit over stats. I think
Yes.
that's kind of what, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, you just look at how, Brandon, you mentioned the players in the roster. You said several good ball handlers, and we have a few names. Elite scorers, have a few names. Good size at the wing, have a few names. Bigs, have a few names. We line those spots up. Last year it was a bunch of scorers. Wow,
Yeah.
done. That's the entire roster.
I just feel like we've got some underrated glue guys that can really change a roster. Think of Thero. Like he's a roster changer. Big
I think
Z
he's
is a
gonna play a
roster
ton.
changer. I hope that he does. I love him. That's one of my favorite pickups.
It's
Yep.
much easier getting chemistry with some new freshmen instead of all transfers, I think.
Yeah.
Because some of these transfers that Muss would bring in have played against each other and may hate each other. We don't know.
And I think it's
works.
important, even to that point, Matt, I think it's important to remember that 3 of these guys aren't really transfers. They're just following their coach from one school to another.
Exactly.
Right? They've already got some cohesion with each other, with the coach, with the system, with all of it. So you've got one guy returning to Arkansas, 3 guys returning to their coach, 3 incoming freshmen. That just leaves you a couple of transfers, right? So that's way easier to deal with than 7, 8, 9 incoming transfers that were like we were talking about the guy on their team last year.
Yep.
It's way easier to deal with that cohesion. I completely on that. And then the last point I wanted to make in this section, just maybe get your thoughts on this, see if there's anything that you would tweak. But as of now, my starting 5 for this group that we have so far, and for me, I have probably 3 variations of this where I think it could go. But probably my favorite right now would be DJ Wagner at the 1, John L. Davis at the 2. Those are your guards. Edu Thero at the 3. I like his size. I like the intangibles he brings. I like what he does a lot on both ends of the court. Brazil at the 4 and Edu at the 5. That would be my versatile, brings you shooting at 3 positions, kind of maybe 4 positions if Thero can take a step forward, a ton of length, good defenders, good experience. I mean, you got 4 fourth-year players and 1 third-year player in that starting 5. Just checks a lot of boxes for me. Would you guys tweak that at all?
I would like to see Knox in our starting 2 spot.
that's one of my variations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having Knox in there instead of either replacing Thero with Knox or moving Thero to the 4 and putting Knox in
That's
the
what
3
I like.
alongside.
Yeah, I like.
Yeah.
That's
I like
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe have Brazil coming off the bench, and Thero at 4, Knox at 3. But all I know is how Knox plays against other elite freshmen, technically. So I don't know how he's going to play against the seasoned 4-year defensive menace from who knows where, Tennessee, I guess, or Alabama. So
yeah, no, and Knox has good experience too with overtime elite. I think that's a little bit more experience against scoring against the defense than maybe other high school kids, but agree completely. We don't know what he's going to look like. I think he's the most likely to earn that starting spot. I saw somebody earlier say have a starting lineup with 3 guards, go with Wagner, John L. Davis, and Boogie Fland, all in the starting 5, along with one of the bigs, either Brazil and Adu or Thero and Adu or whoever you want to put in there.
I mean, that's kind of Cal's bread and butter, right? Playing with the guards and
yeah.
We will see that lineup 100%. It's just whether or not he starts with it or not. I think is the only question.
Cal has done so many different variations. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And some of the players that he's put on the bench and that end up becoming NBA superstars. I always go back to Devin Booker.
Exactly.
Yeah, like
this year, his two guys that are fringe lottery both came off the bench.
Right. And so, like, I don't really worry about if Flan comes off the bench or not, because shoot, he could come off the bench and give us 30.
I agree completely. The playing time will be more important than the starters. Just thinking, it's just fun to theorize, to put the lineup together in your head, but 100%. And with these are the 9 guys, they're all going to play a lot. If it's just, this is the core, you know what I mean? He's probably going to go 8, 9 guys deep. And then some games it might be Richmond may not play a ton. Maybe it's Big Z doesn't play a ton. We don't need the size as much. Maybe that 9th guy might miss out sometimes, but all 9 of these guys are going to be vital, I think. So, all right. So one more thing we want to talk about, just kind of how the rest of the roster is going to look. We don't really know much yet. We don't know how Cal's going to operate, how he's going to navigate this. Not only are we not familiar with Cal, but Cal is in an unfamiliar situation. So it's really hard to predict this kind of thing. But we're going to talk a little bit about what his options are. But first, we're going to take one more quick break, and we will be right back. All right. So I mentioned his name earlier. It seemed like Coleman Hawkins was going to be the guy to fill out the 9th spot. He kind of is. He's like another 6'10" forward. I think he's a little more steady offensively in terms of being able to handle the ball a little bit, facilitate, do those kind of things than someone like Brazil is, but he lacks the raw athleticism, maybe some of the shot blocking, the highlight plays, those kind of things. But I really like what Hawkins does on the court. If it did come down to a maturity thing or a buy-in thing, then 100% I get it. But it's still kind of interesting to imagine what he would be like on this roster. I don't think that he's a viable option anymore now that Brazil is here, but that was the last name Arkansas has been connected to. So that, if Cal is looking for a 10th guy, maybe he's still looking at Coleman Hawkins, but again, it's very doubtful now that Brazil's here. Another guy that Cal had been connected to earlier in the season was a guard, kind of that shooter that we've been kind of alluding to a little bit here. Wooga Poplar from Miami. Shot 39% from 3 last year and stands around 6'5". He could fill in that 3 spot that we're talking about between Knox and Thero. If he came here, he could easily be the starting 3. Again, Cal might be done with the big name guys. I don't know who else he's going to go get and hand out a bunch of NIL money to now that he's got his 9-man rotation. But that would be a very interesting name if he were to join this roster and make it an even 10. And then one more name that I saw pop up on Twitter yesterday. I don't know that it's really how likely this is, even that he even plays college ball next year. But there's an Italian prospect named Dame Sarr who has reportedly yet to make up his mind about where he will play next season. And Arkansas is among one of the few schools listed that have been in contact with him. And he led the Italian national team at the FIBA U18 European Championship with over 17 points a game at 6'6". So again, that 3 spot, good scorer, shooter. Maybe if that's somebody that Cal is looking at, maybe a foreign player that might come in and fill out the roster a little bit. I know for a fact that they are still in contact with a lot of foreign players. I think that most of them are probably for the future more than they are this year. but you never know. He's still got 4 spots to work with. And like I said before, we don't know what the heck he's going to do. I don't think he's ever been in a situation like this where he has so many open spots to work with. I mean, it was literally 13 when he got here, and you can say that it's 12 now that Brazil is back, but it seems like he's done with the big names. And so far, what we've been told is that he will add depth. He will add some guys that maybe have not been recruited as heavily, some guys that are looking to earn their spot. But basically, that he's not looking for guys where he's going to hand out another $500,000, $250,000 in NIL money. Someone that's looking to buy in, someone that's excited to have a scholarship on a tournament contending team, someone that wants to earn NIL money, earn a scholarship spot, maybe even earn minutes. I think that's what he's looking for at this point. And when you get to that level of all the guys that are in the transfer portal, all the uncommitted high school recruits, it's impossible for us to sit here and tell you who the most likely guy is that he's going to get as a depth piece for this team. But those are kind of his options, I think, is what he's looking at to fill out the rest of the roster. I don't think that we will have 13 scholarships distributed at the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have more than like 11. He might go find just a couple more guys that he feels can give us depth, maybe a big guy that's raw that he can maybe, just rebound the ball well or something like that. Maybe an under recruited guy, a JUCO guy, something like that. Just all the stuff I've been talking about already. But yeah, that it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes from here to fill out before the season starts, because I don't think that you can just take 9 guys into a season and hope that that's okay. Do you guys have any more thoughts on how the roster fills out? Maybe what you hope he might look for in these final few spots before we get going?
I mean, just get some guys with some work ethic,
Yeah.
just that want to be there, want to play, want to stick to it. And who knows, maybe end up being a significant player next season. I don't think Cal wants to go through and lose everybody again.
Yeah.
So I think that may be what he's looking for, guys that will maybe stick and be the glue guys for next year's roster. Who knows, maybe there'll be a hidden star in that mix as well.
Well, let's not brush to the wayside just practice squad guys, like a solid energy, JUCO guy, Brandon, like you mentioned, like just guys who will get after the rotating unit, goes a long way. So, I mean, even if we don't sign anyone that we expect to get solid playing time, or we expect them to be, a hidden gem or anything, if we can just get solid guys that can, give our starting unit a good look, that's going to go a mile, especially come tournament time.
Yeah, and I think he's looking for that not only in these final few spots, but also in his grad assistants. You've got guys like Tyler Eulis, his former player that is reportedly on staff now and in I think a player development role. Those are the kind of guys that he's going to throw out in practice against against the first team. You got a guy that's got NBA experience out there running the point on your practice squad. Are you kidding me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you still got rumors floating around of guys like Joe Johnson joining as some kind of assistant. You get like former NBA dudes out there working against your starting 5. That's pretty cool if Cal can put something like that together. So
for sure.
All right. Well, that's all we have to talk about on this episode. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning in to talk some Razorback hoops with us. Reminder, we're brought to you by the Field of 68 Podcast Network. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, leave a review, whatever it is you do on all those sites. I've been your host, Brandon Baker, joined as always by Joey Jackson and Matt Jackson. And as always, go Hogs.
Thanks, everyone.